The story we're going to look at today is the South African plight. Now, many farmers in South Africa are being attacked, some very brutally, but the bulk of them are white. And many South Africans, white South Africans in general, are very scared. In an article entitled "White South Africans Are Preparing for Removal of All Whites Within 5 Years" from zerohedge.com, it starts, back in March, the president of South Africa made a shocking suggestion, which left many white landowners fearing that they would face a race war within the near future. In a speech, Jacob Zuma announced that he wanted the government to begin confiscating white-owned lands before redistributing them to black South Africans. Zuma wants a pre-colonial land audit of land use and occupation patterns to help decide which lands need to be taken, and has said that we need to accept the reality that those who are in parliament where laws are made, particularly the black parties, should unite because we need a two-thirds majority to effect changes in the Constitution. It is believed that Zuma is calling for this radical action in response to the rise of a rival political party known as the Economic Freedom Fighters, who have long called for the confiscation of white-owned lands. Obviously, this kind of talk doesn't bode well for the future of South Africa. You have the leaders of the first and third most popular political parties, both of which promote socialist ideas, openly declaring that they want the government to steal from an entire racial group. Since these political parties wouldn't be in power unless they had some degree of popular support, it's clear that black South Africans are increasingly turning against their white neighbors. It is a perfect recipe for genocide. It's conditions like that have spawned organizations like the Subland. Willie, get down. Damn it, dog. Lay down. Good boy. Back to the story. It's conditions like that which have spawned organizations like the Sudlanders, a massive civilian-run civil defense group that is dedicated to protecting Afrikaners in the event of social collapse or civil war. They're currently getting ready for the possibility of a government-implemented genocide of white South Africans. One of their leaders recently spoke to InfoWars and explained how they plan to respond to that threat. Roche told InfoWars that leftist South African leaders have in recent months threatened the slaughter of all whites and the removal of all whites within 5 years, prompting Sudlanders to prepare for a surprise civil war event that they now believe. Roche told InfoWars that the leftist South African leaders have in recent months threatened the slaughter of all whites and the removal of all whites within 5 years, prompting Sudlanders to prepare for a surprise civil war event which they now believe is imminent. Then we would, in such an open civil war, in such a crisis, gather our people together and seek sanctuary in a remote location, and then to remove ourselves from being wiped out or slaughtered, Roche said. However, the organization doesn't plan to take up arms, and their best plan so far will only accommodate a minority of whites in the country. It's not about taking up arms, it's about retiring from the threat, Roche said. There's this intractable tension that seems to be building in our country, where the two parties can never be reconciled, and the stronger party is openly declaring that it will remove the weaker party within 5 years, slaughter them all, and take their lands. Sudlanders has a large-scale evacuation protocol in place in case of an ethnic civil war happening, designed to remove roughly 20% of the estimated 4.8 million whites in South Africa safely from the embattled region. It's sad that it has come to this. Once the most wealthy and developed nation on the continent, South Africa is quickly turning into an economic basket case, brimming with racial tensions that could spill over at any time. Once again, socialism and multiculturalism have proven to be total failures. Now, we'll go on to another article entitled Bury Them Alive. White South Africans fear for their future as horrific farm attacks escalate. Last month, a British woman, Sue Howarth, and her husband, Robert Lynn, were awoken at 2 a.m. by three men breaking into a window of their remote farm in Dullstroom, a small town in the northeast of South Africa, about 240 kilometers from the nearest capital. The couple who had lived in the area for 20 years were tied up, stabbed, and tortured with a blowtorch for several hours. The masked men stuffed plastic bags down Mrs. Howarth's throat and attempted to strangle her husband with a bag around his neck. The couple were bundled into their own truck, still in their pajamas, and driven to a roadside where they were shot. Mrs. Howarth, 64, a former pharmaceutical company executive, was shot twice in the head. Mr. Lynn, 66, was shot in the neck. Miraculously, he survived and managed to flag down a passerby early on Sunday morning. Mrs. Howarth, who police said was unrecognizable from her injuries, had multiple skull fractures, gunshot wounds, and horrific burns to her breasts. Sue was discovered amongst some trees lying in a ditch, writes Jana Bashoff, reporter for the local Middleburg Observer newspaper. Her rescuers managed to find her by following her groans of pain and then noticing drag marks from the road into the field. Her head was covered with a towel, her eyes swollen shut. She was partially clothed and with just scrapes of her shirt remaining. Her breasts and upper body was bloody. The bag, shoved down her throat, took some effort to remove because her jaw was clamped down tightly. How she managed to breathe with the bag in her throat remains a mystery. One of the rescuers later recalled how Sue was unresponsive except for the constant groaning. Whilst the man ran back to the road and see if an ambulance was... How she managed to breathe with the bag in her throat remains a mystery. One of her rescuers later recalled how Sue was unresponsive except for the constant groaning. Whilst the man ran back to the road to see if an ambulance had not arrived yet, she managed to curl one of her arms around her breasts in a last attempt to protect herself. She was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support, but died 2 days later. Due to her British nationality, her murder attracted an unusual amount of overseas media attention. In any other country, such a crime would be almost unthinkable, but in South Africa, these kinds of farm attacks are happening nearly every day. This year so far, there have been more than 70 attacks and around 25 murders, and similar attacks on white farmers. Earlier this month, for example, 64-year-old Nikki Simpson was tortured with a power drill during an attack involving 3 men at her home on a farm in Vale. During an attack earlier this month, for an example, 64-year-old Nikki Simpson was tortured with a power drill during an attack involving 3 men at her home on a farm in Vale area, about 2 hours drive from Johannesburg. When paramedics arrived, they found 3 dead dogs and a woman lying in a pool of blood. Spokesman Russell Mering told News 24 that they had used a drill to torture her. Police spokesman They used a drill to torture her. Policeman spokesman Lungelo Dlamini said. Official statistics on farm attacks are Official statistics on farm attacks are non-existent due to what human rights groups have described as a cover-up by the notoriously corrupt and potentially complicit South African government. The most reliable numbers are released by the Transvaal Agricultural Union, which represents commercial farmers and civil rights groups in AfriForum. According to the TAU, last year there were 345 attacks, resulting in 70 deaths, the highest death toll since 2008. In 2015, there were 318 attacks, resulting in 64 deaths, and the year before, 277, resulting in 67. In total, between 1998 and the end of 2016, 1,848 people have been murdered in farm attacks, 1,187 farmers, 490 family members, 147 farm employees, and 24 people who happened to be visiting the farm at the time. While South Africa has one of the highest rates of violent crime anywhere in the world, the attacks on white farmers are no ordinary crime. In 2014, in a 2014 report, The Reality of Farm Tortures in South Africa, AfriForum wrote that the horror experienced during farm tortures is almost incomprehensible. The well-known Blood Sisters from the South Africa company Crime Scene Cleanup have rightly indicated that their experience from that in the well-known Blood Sisters from the South African company Crime Scene Cleanup have rightly indicated that in their experience, farm tortures are by far the most horrific acts of violence in South Africa, the report said. They are of the opinion that the term farm murders is misleading and that the term farm terror and farm tortures are more suitable. While sometimes farmers and their families are tortured to obtain information, such as the whereabouts of keys to the safe, human rights groups say that the excessive brutality may be intended to send a message to the general farming community: get out of the country. Victims are often restrained, harmed with weapons such as machetes, pitchforks. Victims are often restrained, harmed with weapons such as machetes and pitchforks, burned with boiling water or hot irons, dragged behind vehicles, and shot. Female victims are often raped during the attacks. AfriForum warns that these attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated, military-style raids, but says community farmers watch groups and sharing of information on WhatsApp and Facebook were thwarting a significant number. The three men responsible for killing Mrs. Howarth, Themba William Yika, Nkosia Kosanathi Yika, and Lucas Mao. Themba William Yika, Kosanathi Yika, and Lucas Macau were arrested soon after, and more than 150 farmers turned up to demonstrate outside the court. But any form of justice is incredibly rare, and white farmers are increasingly questioning their future. The number of white farmers in South Africa has halved in a little over 2 decades to just 30,000. Thousands more farms are up for sale. Now, in an excerpt from an article from news.com.au. In 2010, high-profile ANC member Julius Malema sang "Shoot the Farmers and Kill the Boer," which Genocide Watch describes as a once revolutionary. In 2010, high-profile ANC member Julius Malema sang "Shoot the Farmer, Kill the Boer," which Genocide Watch describes as once a revolutionary song, but now an incitement to commit genocide. Malema was convicted for hate speech, and the singing of the song was banned. But just 7 months later, President Jacob Zuma sang the song himself at an ANC event, in direct contempt of the judge's ruling. Malema was later kicked out of the ANC, forming his own Marxist party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is now the third largest national party in parliament. Recently, Malema has been traveling the country urging black South Africans to take back land from Dutch thugs. "People of South Africa, where you see beautiful land, take it. It belongs to you," Malema was quoted in the Telegraph as telling Parliament. Perhaps in response to populist pressure from Malema, Zuma earlier this month called for the confiscation of white-owned land without compensation. Zuma urged the black parties in the parliament to unite to form the two-thirds majority that would be needed to make the necessary changes in the constitution. Last week, during the debate in parliament about the farm attacks, an ANC MP shouted, "Bury them alive," while MP Pieter Groenewald was speaking out about the plight of white farmers. This is proof that the utterances of political leaders could lead to violence and murders, and that the issue of farm murders is of little importance to the ANC, AfriForum's head of community safety, Ian Cameron, said in a statement afterwards. Certain members of the ANC were chatting during the debate and not listening nor partaking at all. While right-wing groups have claimed South Africa is experiencing white genocide, Genocide Watch disputes that characterization. According to the group's founding president, Dr. Gregory Stanton, early warnings of genocide are still deep in South African society, though genocide has not begun. Now, whether or not genocide is actually taking place in South Africa is not my place to say. I've simply read off a couple articles that show different details about the plight in South Africa. Whether or not you have family members in South Africa, if you can offer your support, there will be 2 links in the description below for places you can donate to help relocate white South Africans. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening. This has been Kyrgyzstan First News. Good night.